Welcome to episode 89 of Real Health Radio. You can find all the links talked about as part of the show at the show notes, which are located at www.7, the word all spelled out, so seven health.com/89.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey everyone, it's Chris Sandel here, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Real Health Radio. This is another week with a guest, and today's guest is Alexa Schirm. So Alexa is a busy mom of 3 girls and the author behind the site Simple Roots Wellness. She received her bachelor's degree in nutrition and has taken a holistic approach in teaching people how the body functions and makes recommendations through this understanding. Alexa has a passion for helping people reach their goals of optimal health through teaching the importance of eating real food and how easy and delicious these changes can be. Alexa is also passionate about shedding light on the many myths and misunderstandings that are perpetuated in the world of wellness through her award-winning podcast, Simple Roots Radio, taking once complicated nutrition issues and simplifying them. She enjoys helping her readers to sift through the nonsense and teaches them to start eating to support health for life using real foods, helping them eat to live. So I became aware of Alexa in the last couple of months. I was asking Lauren, my intern, for podcast recommendations, and Alexa's name came up. So I started reading her blog and listening to her podcast and basically vetting her like I do for all people who come on the show. I do a lot of research before I invite anyone on, and I really liked what she had to say. There's a down-to-earth feel that she has that is very similar to myself. She wants people to be healthy and to do it in the easiest possible way. I also related to her honesty as she talked about her own struggles with health and with running a business. And too much of what I see in the health and fitness world is people creating this real facade or just posturing, making out like their life and their health is perfect and that they've cracked the code and you too can if you just follow their 5-step simple formula. And so I like the fact that Alexa was speaking out against this stuff and how not only did it not help her business, it was detrimental to her enjoyment of running a business and it was negatively affecting her health. So we talk about this as part of the show, and a big part of Alexa's blog is that she is a cook and she shares her recipes, or she's a cook in her own home. And so we speak about this and how you can make cooking easier for yourself and how you can do this even if you have a busy schedule. And as I already mentioned, Alexa is a mom of 3 young girls. So we chat about raising healthy eaters, and she has some really great advice around this stuff, and it is not preachy and it is something that I can totally subscribe to. So this was a great episode, and Alexa was super easy to chat with and provided some really helpful suggestions. So I hope you are going to enjoy it. Without further ado, this is my interview with Alexa Schirm. Hey Alexa, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I guess to start with, for those who are unfamiliar with who you are or what you do, are you able to give a bit of background on yourself? And this can be personal stuff or professional stuff, whatever you think is relevant, just to give people an idea of who you are.
Yeah. Well, my name, like you said, my name's Alexa, and I'm from the middle of Iowa, which is rolling hills and farmland as well. And I grew up in rural Iowa, but I wasn't very aware of kind of health or nutrition. Like I always seemed to have pretty good health as a kid. I was semi-athletic. And then it was a diagnosis of GERD when I was in high school that actually woke me up to the realization that I wasn't indispensable, like that I wasn't indestructible, and that my health really came down to what I was doing to it, like how I was treating it. And it was through that diagnosis and a really wise doctor that told me basically she was going to give me 1 round of prescription medication for GERD. And if anyone struggles with acid reflux or knows anything about it, the medication is actually really harmful to a growing child's body and to an adult body. And so it's not really meant for long-term use. And so she kind of gave me an ultimatum of, you either change your diet or I'm no longer going to be your doctor. And I was kind of like, what? Like, wow, like this is incredible, because to me, going to the doctor just meant kind of getting a prescription, right? Getting a pill to fix whatever you needed.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of at that point that I opened my eyes to realize what I was doing was having an impact on how I felt. And so that was, I think, about my sophomore year, junior year in high school. And, I didn't know a lot about nutrition then. My family didn't do a lot, although I watched countless of my family members diet, do the whole diet yo-yo thing where they lose weight and then eventually gain it back and then try to go on another diet, and just looking at the lack of joy so many women had on their face, and men who played this game. And so I was always interested in it, but yet I didn't quite know what that meant. So I went to college. I originally I was planning on going to medical school, and then I learned about nutrition, and I was just intrigued by it. I was intrigued by what food could do to the body, and later became more intrigued by the mental aspect of how our mind and food and our body all kind of correlate into this system that really runs our show. And so I went to school, nutrition school. I graduated with a degree in dietetics, and I didn't become a dietitian. And I just felt like there were so many, I don't want to say this is going to be controversial, but so many flaws in the dietetic and becoming a registered dietitian. And so I think at that point, when I was the only one in my graduating class who was like, I just don't feel like what we're being taught really aligns with what our body needs, that I decided that I wasn't going to do that, but I didn't know what to do, right? Now I'm kind of unemployable to some degree. So I started my own business and really dove into what I would consider more of the holistic route of nutrition, less of the medical world and less of the food pyramid stuff that we have here in the States, and really just more into, okay, like, how does our body work and what does it need? And throughout that study, man, my eyes have been open, and I feel like it has totally transformed and changed from almost everything I learned in college to this point now. I don't want to say they're two totally different tracks, but I just really learned that the systems and the overnight success and the pills and the quick diets don't work. Like, long term, they're not going to work. That's been a proven statistic. And so what does work? And that's really just so unique to you. And it really comes down to just knowing yourself and knowing your body, and changing your mindset and really desiring health. I always say that my goal is to help people live with health, not live for health. And I think there's two totally different things. And I see so many people live their life in search of health, chasing after health. But health is just a means for us to actually live our life, not something that we should ever chase after. Because if we're chasing it, we're really never going to reach it, I don't think. And instead, we have to learn to work with it. So that's kind of like a short story of how I got to where I am today. And now super passionate about just opening people's eyes to like what they desire in life and where they want to go, and living for something greater than just health. But how do we use health as a means to get there? So it's just a change in mentality on my end. And I say that just a change in mentality. It's more than that. It's hard, but that's really my passion, and that's what I do at Simple Roots Wellness, is try to help people get to that point of where they can live with health, not live for health.
Okay, so there was a lot that you mentioned there, though I'd love to go back and just get some more info on. So yeah. You said that you had the diagnosis of GERD, and you were told to go on to change what you were doing. I mean, how was that if you were living in a family where everyone was doing something different to you? How was it making those changes as someone who's probably a young adult or even just a teenager? How was that experience?
I don't remember all of it. I just remember the words of the doctor, and she tried to clearly lay it out, like real foods fruits and vegetables, things that come from the earth, are always going to be better than the processed foods, vending machine food, school food even. And so I just think I started becoming more aware. Now, even though my family did a lot of, like there was some, my mom was an active dieter. We always had dinners together at night. So I always remember my mom cooking good food at night. I think I got into trouble with packaged breakfast foods and processed lunch foods. And I was a teenager, so going out with my friends usually involved pizza or fast food or, eating at odd times or really late at night. So I think the transition wasn't as hard at home. It was more hard socially. And that social aspect was really something that I had to be okay setting aside what my friends thought was cool or what my friends wanted to do, and just really kind of get to a place where I honored myself enough to say that didn't matter. So again, I don't think it was as much of a change for me. What do I want to say? I don't think that the change in food bothered me as much as the social interaction bothered me.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, how long did it take for that transition to happen? And I know it's always a process, but from where you were at that place of having that meeting in the office to where, if you were to look back, you're like, okay, there's been some fairly significant changes that have taken place here.
Yeah, well, I only had to do one round of medication, which I believe was only 30 days.
Okay.
And it wasn't a long time. And I really did, I didn't have GERD anymore after that. I would say that I probably didn't change my diet enough to notice huge changes other than I lessened acid reflux. And I used to suffer from canker sores a lot. And I believe at that time, that's when my canker sores really, they got more infrequent. So I didn't have them nearly as often. It wasn't until later when I gave up some more foods that were just allergenic to me, and I started learning about food sensitivities and what viruses and bacteria can do in your body and just kind of how to cure those. That's when I eliminated canker sores from my life. But I feel like I noticed small changes of like progression in just little areas. But the biggest thing was I didn't have to go back on acid reflux medication, and I kept my doctor. So that was really good. So it happened really, really quickly. But again, I was young, I was a teenager, and stuff always happens faster in younger kids than it always does as adults. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you live in Iowa, and I get the impression,
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that it's a rural setting. I've had a look at some of your Instagram posts, and it looks pretty rural. Do you now, like being in that place, are you growing your own food? Do you have your own animals outside of, say, pets, like a dog or something like that? Are you producing your own food?
Yeah. So we do live in rural Iowa, which is really nice because there's a lot of respect for the land and the environment. Granted, a lot of it is conventional farming. However, we do grow. So we have our own gardens and we have goats. So we milk goats for goat's milk. We have cows, grass-fed cows. And then we just got bees this weekend. So hopefully we'll have our own honey this weekend. But, the thing about Iowa is we have winter. So we can only really have a good growing season 5 months out of the year. Okay. And so all winter long is a little bit more difficult, but we really do have, we had family come up from Texas and, they live in Dallas, Fort Worth area, which is a huge metropolitan area in rural Iowa. And they were just like, you have access to so many more good foods than we do. And that kind of blew my mind. I'm like thinking, but you live in like one of the largest cities in the country. And yet you're telling us in rural Iowa, for me, it's over 2 hours to a Whole Foods that we have better access to better produce and better meat. But again, I think it's just because of the local atmosphere of people just have gardens everywhere and we can grow it. But yeah, so, it was kind of fascinating. So we do grow a lot of our own food, but we also have access to some really nice grocery stores who really pay attention to quality foods here. So that is really nice for us.
Okay. And so you said you studied for a bachelor's degree in dietetics, and then afterwards you didn't want to go down the normal dietetics route, and I think you then set up your own fitness studio. So was this then focused pretty much on you doing exercise and exercise classes? What was that about?
Yeah. So after college, my last year of college, I started my own business, which ended up being a gym. So I had a fitness studio and I taught fitness classes, which I did for 6 years after I graduated from college. And I feel like at that time, I had a better grasp of movement of the body than I did nutrition. Like I said, I went to school for nutrition for 4 years, but I left there feeling like there was so much missing that I couldn't quite put the pieces together. And I knew what I was learning didn't really add up to what I believed was true health. And so for me, I had a really hard time. I tried personal consulting as soon as I graduated with just a few people, and I just could never get it. Like I couldn't feel right about it.
Okay.
So for me, the fitness studio was a time for me to learn about people and really see their body in movement. And most of the people who were coming to me were people who wanted to be healthy. They wanted to maybe lose weight or get rid of some of their health problems. So it was a good time for me to realize, okay, what does movement do and how are they living their life? So then I could start to put pieces together to how change was actually happening. And also in that time, do a whole bunch of study on holistic health. So really, as my fitness career kind of continued, I slowly started adding in more and more nutrition until eventually I sold the gym and I had started Simple Roots, and then I sold the gym and really just decided to focus on nutrition altogether. So I think it was like a safety net for I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was graduating from college, and we're expected to have a plan for what we're going to do with our life, and so it was kind of that filling that void of unknown. But I think in the end, it was really valuable in just learning about people and about health in that kind of setting, like firsthand how they work, not textbook health, but just looking at the individuals themselves.
Yeah. And did you have a natural background in exercise? Was this something you'd spent a lot of your youth doing?
I would say that I was semi-athletic. Like I was never great at ball sports, but
Okay.
I always was fascinated by I always liked to run and I love to stay active. So then when I went to college, I took a class of fitness to become a fitness instructor, and that was my job in college. And so growing up in a small town, right? Like we didn't have access to a lot of gyms. At the time, there was not any gyms in my hometown. And I'm thinking, but there's still 5,000 or 6,000 people in the city and there's not a gym. And so for me, it was, what can I bring back to my community too, that's going to impact them? And I think for me, it was a lot easier to kind of reach out and help people that were close to me and that I knew. I mean, we live in a town where everyone really knows everyone, which is great and unfortunate at the same time. But for me, it was like a way to give back. And I knew those people were going to be open enough to let me learn about them too at the same time. And so, yeah, I think so. It started in college. And then when I was in college, it was kind of like, well, why don't we have something like this? Like, it's really pretty, I don't want to say it's easy, but obviously owning your own business, once you get into that world, it's a whole nother story. But in my head, when I was in college, I thought how easy it would be to open a gym and start fitness classes. And so it just seemed like a right next step, especially when I was going to graduate, knowing that I wasn't going to really be employable to anywhere any of my classmates were going to work, because I decided not to get my registered dietitian license, and nutritionists in general are just really looked down upon here, at least in Iowa. I feel like in the United States in general. And so it seemed like the right next step for me, or I was just quick to jump the gun because I was terrified of not having a job after college.
Okay. And so then the transition into setting up Simple Roots.
So Simple Roots has been established since 2014, I believe. Yeah, it's February 2014. So we're 2017. So it's like, 3 years old? Going into my 4th year. Is that right? Yeah, because we're in 2017. I don't know. And so I had originally started teaching classes face-to-face. I learned early on that I was not necessarily great at personal consulting. And I just openly say that because I get asked all the time, do you do personal consulting? I love personal consulting. I feel like it takes a whole different skill set that I've just not developed yet. And I learned that early on, and I just knew that I was just better speaking to the masses. Now, living in rural Iowa, there's only so many masses that you can speak to, and only for so long. And we actually had some good friends who lived up in Minneapolis, and they ran a blog, that was their business. And so they kind of showed us how you could make a living, so to say, doing something that you loved while reaching the masses. And for me, it was less about the income. I mean, it has to be, because the stuff is hard. And it was more about, wow, like I can reach people who aren't in rural Iowa, because at this time I had started a family. And so for me, it was getting more and more challenging to go every single night to teach classes, because then I was missing out on family time. And we really didn't have any. And so it was just like a huge opportunity. I was pregnant with my third, and I had never had a maternity leave because I owned my own business, right? So as soon as I had a baby and came home from the hospital, the next day I was back to work, because if I wasn't working, no one was, the gym wasn't making money and had overhead. So I had to go back to work. And so I had decided on my third baby, I was going to take a 4-week maternity leave. And so that is really what started Simple Roots. Simple Roots started out as a means to take the core people of nutrition, people I was trying to help, and give them something through the summer to help them continue on this journey, but that I could be at home with my family for at least 4 weeks. Like that was my determination. And so I created this online course. It was called Nutrition Boot Camp. I really only intended it for people in my local community and surrounding communities to be a part of. And when I put it online, I realized, hey, I don't know some of these people who are signing up for this. And it just slowly transformed my view. Like I knew people in the blog world could reach people all across the world, but it really wasn't I didn't really grasp it. I think it's really hard to grasp, maybe not so much anymore, but grasp that until it really started happening. And that's when I decided, I was like, I really like this. I like the aspect of teaching online. I like the aspect of how you can reach people online and the different things you can create online. And it just really seemed to fit me. And really, I think in the end where I wanted to go. So that's how Simple Roots started. It started out for local people, and it just transformed into helping people all across the world.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool.
One of the things you'd mentioned there was just about doing consulting or being a practitioner, and that's just not something you've been able to do so far, or it's not something you had a natural skill set in. And I do think that is a real skill within itself. And that is my real whole business, is working with people one-on-one, much more than anything else. And it is something that I think I'm very good at, and I've spent a lot of time working at. Yeah. But I speak to a lot of people who almost do it because it can be the thing that earns them a lot of money. But when they're honest about it, they're like, I really struggle with this. It takes a hell of a lot of effort to work with people. There's a lot of anxiety around it. If they could be doing anything else, they would prefer to be doing all the other aspects of their business. So I think it's important to notice, what are your strengths and weaknesses and what are you drawn towards? And it doesn't mean that you can't do that at some point, but it might be that actually it's just not for you, and you've got other gifts and other things that you would prefer to be spending your time on.
I agree. Yes, 100%. I mean, yeah, you can make money, but I feel like if we're just honest with ourselves and realize that, and we escape what we would be doing if money wasn't an issue, hands down, I just don't have that gifting to be able to do consulting. And there are plenty of other people out there who do it really well. And if we all just did what we did really well and left what we didn't to other people, think how much further along that we would be in this world. So that's always my motto, is do what you do and do it well, and don't do what you can't do. Work together on that. And that's why I love people like you who can do that. And I can refer my clients who need that to them. But yeah, I learned early on that it wasn't for me, and I've continually tried, because people are like, why don't you do this? It could be the foundation of your business, and it could be what helps your business to grow. And, it just doesn't feel right anytime that I try. And I'm like, how many times do I have to keep trying to learn? No, just say no. Yeah. So I've gotten there. I think I've gotten there, especially now that I've met people who do it, and do it well. And then I can say, you know what? This person does it really right. I would highly recommend them. And then it takes that pressure off, knowing that these people aren't just not going to get help, that they can get help from people who do it well.
Yeah. And so look, one thing I think you do really well from looking at your blog is cooking and recipe. So was this something that you were always into? Like, how did that come to be?
I never didn't like to cook. I don't ever remember desiring to, I wouldn't say that when I was in high school, I loved to cook. Like it just wasn't something I ever really thought about. I enjoyed, like cooking Christmas cookies, and doing stuff like that. Now I have one sister and she absolutely hates to cook. Her husband does all the cooking, all the grocery shopping. It blows my mind. So like I see people who really genuinely don't like to cook. I am not one of them. Like I love to create. And I think that's why I like the online space too, is I can create. I feel like that's one of my giftings. And so for me, showcasing, I try to showcase easy, realistic food that is creative in some aspect, but not over the top. And so for me, it's just a space to allow me to be able to create, but also to showcase healthy food in a delicious way. Because I think so often we have health food that's kind of bland and boring.
Yeah.
When health food is meant to be delicious. And so I'm trying to verge the gap but yet realistic at the same time, because I live in rural Iowa. So we have to remember we're very meat and potato society. So I can't get too far outside my box, and it's just culturally. So I still feel like I still hold on to that a little bit, but I just try to keep it realistic and showcase that diet food doesn't have to be bland and boring, that it can taste really, really delicious. And it's just a good space for me to do that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been fun. I think I've tried to slowly incorporate more about why these foods are good for us and why they are okay to eat, and try to get rid of some of the stigma that some foods hold. So that's kind of my passion with it.
And have you done any formal cooking courses, or it's just you've learned this in the kitchen?
Yeah, it was really mostly learning. In college, we had to do a few cooking classes. Just to learn about the science behind food and baking and things like that. And I think that's what really sparked my interest, was like, there's like methods to this. It's not just madness and chaos. It's, there's systems to it. And if you do it long enough, and I feel like sometimes I try to showcase that, I always tell people, it's like, once you create a base for food, like say, fried rice, right? Or tacos, like you can create that a million different ways. It's just kind of all the same thing, it's just with different varieties of food. And I feel like so often we get overwhelmed in our mind by eating the same foods over and over and over, yet wanting to get outside the box, when we really could just change what we're eating over and over and just add different elements to it. And it would completely transform the dish. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you actually did a really excellent podcast show. I can't remember when it was, but it was like what to cook and you don't feel like cooking anything. And I'd love if you could share some of that information from it, because I feel this is where people struggle the most. Like when they have time, when they can spend time the evening or on the weekend, like it's easy for them. Like they can spend the time making something, but it's when people are time pressured or they're busy or whatever, that's where things really fall by the wayside. And so your advice as part of that show is really helpful. So I'd love if you could share it with people. Yeah.
So basically my idea was what to cook when you don't feel like cooking anything, because this happens to all of us. I think at some point, I'm busy during the work week. So what I do is we have a list of go-to meals. So our go-to meals are things that I know how to cook, that they come easy, and I tend to have the ingredients on hand. So there's things you can throw into your meal plan that are really no-brainers, because I think if we add too many things that we have to think about, I mean, there's millions and millions of recipes coming to the website or coming to the World Wide Web every single day. It's overwhelming. And if we just stick with what we know, then it makes cooking seem less complex. So really just trying to simplify it. So it's a list of go-to meals, really is the basis of what to cook when you don't feel like cooking anything that you could just grab from. So I always tell people to start out with 5 recipes, 5 things that your family likes, that are healthy, and how to make really easily. So for us, it's like we have these protein pancakes, blender protein pancakes. They're literally 5 ingredients. You throw it all in a blender, blend it up, and you have pancakes. obviously you have to griddle them or whatever.
Yeah.
So we have breakfast, right? We have some form of tacos because my kids love tacos. Stuffed sweet potatoes are one of ours. Let me think. Lettuce wraps. And usually like some kind of stir fry or fried rice. So those are like my 5 go-to meals. And we always have stuff for the blender protein pancakes. And my husband said the other day, he's like, I feel like we eat these all the time. But I'm like, some weeks we really do. My kids love them. They devour them. They're healthy, you know? So it's just those things that you easily know how to make. You tend to have the ingredients on hand, and you can just, sometimes this sounds so simple, but sometimes we let our minds get so overwhelmed we can't think of anything. Like if you're wandering around the grocery store, I feel like we've all been there, and you're hungry and all you want to do is just find something to eat and make it quick, right? And instead of just allowing that stress to build of it's 3:00, now what am I going to make? Just having them written down on a piece of paper that you can pull out, whether it's in, like you could have it on your phone, in your planner. I just have something hanging up in the cupboard at our kitchen, and I can just open it up and be like, oh yeah, there's that, we could add that this week, or I have the stuff to make that tonight, and I just do it. So it's stuff you don't have to think about and doesn't stress you out. Food and eating should not be a stress in our life. It should be something that we enjoy and we look forward to because of relaxation. And so often we make it so stressful that we can't even enjoy it. And then we're kind of left questioning or making bad decisions. So I started with a list of 5, and I really like people to work up to 15 or 20 just to create variety. Or if you don't want to do that, I change mine with the seasons because I'm a big believer in seasonal eating. I feel like it just adds a lot of variety. So you change it with the seasons. And that's really a great starting point for creating food when you don't feel like cooking anything, because it's quick, easy, simple. That it's almost easier, and it makes you feel better than just going through the drive-thru or getting takeout again, and really reserving those for special occasions. So that was our mission behind that podcast.
And are you someone who does lots of cooking in batches and then freezing and that kind of thing, or you are normally making things from scratch most of the time?
I would love to tell you I freeze things. I don't.
Okay.
More power to the people who do. So one thing that I do love to do is on the weekends, I try to take, or at the start of the week, a couple of hours. I always tell for me, it's like a 2-hour challenge. So I set 2 hours aside. I try to do this once a week, and I just make the bare bones staples. And so if I'm going to have shredded meat that week, so I'll put a roast or chicken in the crock pot, right? So I have shredded meat all week. Or I always cook like quinoa or rice ahead of time, bake sweet potatoes. So basically anything that reheats well, I always try to cook in that 2-hour window. But I don't try to waste a whole Saturday doing this or a whole Sunday. I just really try to limit it to that 2 hours, and I go off there. But this takes having a plan. And I think that's the most critical thing, because I feel like so many people can't eat healthy or don't eat healthy simply because they don't have good food on hand. And it's really hard to eat healthy when you don't have it at home. So trying to, we always recommend making a plan. So writing out ideas for what you're going to eat during the week, because ideas, again, take the stress off of it. Grocery shop, so you make sure you have that food on hand. And then I always just spend 2 hours prepping whatever I can for that week. So for me, it usually looks like our grain for the week, whether it's rice or quinoa, baked sweet potatoes, a dressing. So I do like to make homemade like dressings or marinades, like pesto sauce is one of our favorites, or just a quick balsamic dressing or something like that. And then sometimes I'll make up like breakfast bowls. So whether that's overnight oats or muesli, or even sausage and roasted sweet potatoes. So grab and go breakfast, because for us, breakfast morning time is chaotic. So it's literally self-portioned dishes. So I'm never doing anything, for me, I'm not doing anything in massive bulk quantities. Like you see people doing 25 freezer meals in a day. I've never been successful at that without taking an entire day. So for me, I just focus on the small things. Like I focus on the work week, and I wait for the weekend until later. I focus usually on Monday through Friday morning, and what can I get done to help ease that burden? And most of the time, I'm only cooking 3 nights a week. Maybe, Tuesday nights we tend to have something. And then I don't worry about Friday nights until the end of the week. On Friday, then I reevaluate for the weekend, because plans come up, things change or whatever. And then So really for us, Tuesday night we're gone. I just cook Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And generally Monday is a slow cooker meal. Tuesday or Wednesday's leftovers of that, made in a different way. So if we're having a roast, then Wednesday night we're either having, shredded beef and cabbage stuffed sweet potatoes, or shredded beef tacos. It's super simple stuff. Like I keep it really, really basic, and I save my new recipes to try on the weekend when I have more time.
Yeah. And I think there's loads of stuff that you said there that I recommend with clients as well. So having them have planning and forethought, and knowing that then food is on hand at the point that they're getting hungry, and just maybe reserving a couple of hours on the weekend to do some cooking, to maybe make a batch of soup, or to just do some prep work, because that little time up front then saves so much time and pain later on during the week. And just, when clients, the feedback of that is like, it just makes things so much easier. And it takes a while to get into the swing of things. And there'll be certain times where people are away on the weekend, it doesn't happen, but they will really notice the difference of being away on a weekend and it not happening versus a weekend when it does happen, and how that pans out then for the rest of the week. So the more people can just have that become a routine, it just gets so much easier for them.
It does. It really just becomes like second nature. Like you don't even really have to think about it once you start doing it. But it's like anything. It's just creating that habit behind it a habit is all you, and then it equates to a reward. And I feel like once you start to value from that, once you start to see how much time it really does save you, man, then it's just like the weeks I don't do it, I'm regretting it for sure.
And so you mentioned you've got 3 kids, and you said things can be a little bit chaotic, but I would love to chat just in terms of raising healthy eaters. And I know you've done a couple of podcasts on this, but just getting your thoughts or ideas or principles on how you think about food and eating in regards to your kids.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I feel like I kind of go against the grain with a lot of things, and it's not intended to be controversial or anything like that. But I just really just tried to like hit the simple, realistic, basic principles. And because to me, the most important value of life is fully living life in every aspect. And I'm going to get to why this is important for healthy eaters, but I really think that if people really focus on living life and they focus less on how much work they had to do and the pressures of being busy and being successful, and being successful in health, that stuff can overwhelm our day. And I feel like I see people work from 6 a.m. to 9 or 10 o'clock p.m. And I'm like, when are you living life? But what I found is, through research and studying the older population, right, the people who are living long, healthy lives, is that they really valued life. And I find that when people really value life, they live healthier without thinking about it, right, without being strapped to it. So my goal with raising healthy eaters is not to make food a focus of anything. It's to make food relaxing and enjoyable, but it's not a big deal. And what is a big deal is getting outside to play, going on bike rides, going on hikes, getting them in the garden, getting them used to living life. And I feel like in that, they're not really picky eaters. Now, granted, my daughter goes to school now, so she's learned a whole lot of things at school. And things that she never used to pay attention to are totally disgusting to her now. It's all things that she's learned at school. But I found that if we don't make a big deal about eating time, that it just happens. And I think that's what we're missing is adults have made such a big deal about eating time and what they should eat and how many calories it has and how many macronutrients it has in it, that we've lost focus that food is just meant to be eaten and relaxing. And the less you focus on it, the more healthy you will eat, because that's what your body is actually craving. So when we overwhelm ourselves, then we eat all the bad things. And so I take a really relaxed approach to eating. I, of course, have healthy food on hand, and we eat meal times. And if they don't eat meal times, that's fine, but that was kind of their meal. So I'm a big believer that they were born with intuitive eating principles, meaning like a baby, for instance. If you try to feed a baby who isn't hungry, they'll probably just push the bottle out of their mouth, right? Like they'll just play with it. They won't eat it. However, if you don't feed a baby who's hungry, like they'll go from 0 to hungry in a matter of seconds, and they're unconsolable, right? Babies know, like infants know hunger cues like no one else.
Yeah.
And so we have to foster that. And so I've taken the approach of I never force my kids to eat. I never make them try new foods. It's encouraged, but it's never forced. And so for me, it's just allowing them to pay attention to their intuitive eating principles. Now, of course, right, they're at the age where they know there's sweet things, and everyone, no matter how healthy your eater is, are always going to be attracted to that, right? Like that's not a parenting fail. That's human nature.
Yeah.
And so, of course, those things are like, I would say the only things that are reserved is junk food, right? Like, but anything else to me is fair game. So like, for instance, they don't like what I had for supper. I always try to have one healthy option or one safe, I call it a safe food on the table. So whatever it is, like I always try to make one thing that I know that they're going to eat. Generally during the work week when they're in school and it's busy, we always have meals that my family generally always likes. On the weekend when we're trying new things, it can be scary for a kid. They have really sensitive taste buds. Like I think we need to be in tune to that. But even more than that, I think forcing kids to eat food when they're not hungry is not necessarily picky eating. It's intuitive eating principles. Like there are days when my kids don't eat anything, and then there are days when we can't stop them from eating. And so it's not, I don't think a meal is going to make or break them. So I'm really relaxed about it. You know, we have dinner. They're allowed to fill their own plate. They're not allowed to, they don't have to finish it. They just kind of eat what they want. And they know that within the 2-hour window of supper or lunchtime, they're not allowed snacks, right? So, of course, kids could just snack all day and forget meals. But within that 2-hour window, they know, I remind them like, hey, if you don't want to finish that, that's fine. But then, you're not going to get another meal tonight, or, you're going to have to wait until snack time at 3:00 in the afternoon or whatever it is. So am I making sense of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a big advocate of intuitive eating, and this is a lot of how I practice with adults. So
right.
Have you read that book? Was that where you got a lot of this information from?
Oh, so we read that during college and I did a book report on it. And it started there. I was like, yes. And then I think once I had my own kids and just watching and being fascinated by kids. And I feel like the little bit of counseling that I did do with adults, so many of the food issues stem from childhood. Yeah. And then I married a man who has food issues because of childhood food issues, right? And I think for me, my parents never forced us to eat anything we didn't want to eat. They never forced us to clean our plates. Like that was never a thing. And I always look at my sister and I think, wow, we are the least picky people ever. Like I may not like everything, but I'll try anything, I'm just open to that because to me, I don't have food fears. And I feel like we ingrain fear into kids at a very early age, which creates food fears. Eating is the first independent skill a child will get. They're starting to get food independence right at 6 months of age, right? Or whatever. People do baby-led weaning. They can start to pick up things and put it in their mouth. It's the first independent skill a baby or a child will ever get. And as soon as we take that away, I feel like that's when we start to see this resistance, this what I call the massive food fight that will never end. My sister does this with her son, and we've worked on this, she wants him to eat his meal when she cooks it for him. And I understand how frustrating it is as a parent to cook a big meal and see your kids just walk away from it. It's incredibly frustrating. But I assure her, if you don't make it a big deal, he will eat. When he's under the care of me, and if I don't say, you have to eat all of this, it's just the thought. Again, it's a mentality issue. It's a fight. And if we just foster what they already have inside of them, they're going to be healthy eaters. And they're going to go through phases where they are picky eaters, where they're trying different things. But we have to remember also how quickly a child's taste buds change. I mean, think about you as an adult. I'm sure there are foods you remember not liking as a child. Like for me, I used to hate onions. I used to hate Asian flavors. There was a lot of things that I remember specifically not loving. I used to hate noodles. I hated carbonated, the feeling of carbonation. Yeah. And now as an adult, right? None of that stuff bothers me. But children they're so sensitive. Their taste buds are so fragile and new and pure that as we age, our taste buds get less and less. That's why like the elderly population like have to salt everything excessively because they lose a lot of taste. But our children taste so intensely, and textures can really bother them. But if we don't make it a big deal, later on, it won't be a big deal. If we make it a big deal now, it's always going to be a big deal.
And it's
so my
interesting.
backwards approach is, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting as you're saying all this, because I'm thinking back, and I've done this anyway. I've just thought about my own eating habits and my own childhood, and I was a picky eater as a child more because I was disinterested in food and I just wanted to get on with other things than anything else. But my parents, and my mum in particular, when I think back, like they were just so accommodating. So if I didn't want to eat food, I didn't really have to eat food, or they'd make a roast and I didn't really like fatty foods or really a lot of meat. So I'd end up just eating the vegetables as part of the roast because I just wasn't that interested. But like now I eat a ton of food and I really love food, and I will eat pretty much anything. And even when I think back as being a kid, even though there would be lots of things that I wasn't that interested in, I still had quite a diverse range of eating. Like I still remember at age 6 or 7 eating oysters because we lived in Sydney, I was by the sea, and so that just seemed like a normal thing to do. Whereas for a lot of kids, the thought of eating an oyster would seem so horrible, but it felt very normal to me. So, yeah, I am very grateful that the same way as you mentioned, where I didn't have food forced down my throat, where I have to sit at the table and I wasn't allowed to leave until I clean my plate or anything along those lines. And I think my parents probably were a little worried at certain points that I just wasn't that interested in food and I was so small. But you know what? In the end, it all worked out okay.
Right. I always say that there's no child who has ever starved with free access to healthy food. It won't happen. And like it won't happen. And the more you fight, that kids can go a long time without eating and they're going to be perfectly fine. But it's stubbornness. They're stubborn. They have no better thing to do than to irritate us sometimes, I feel like. That's my life. I'm like, you have nothing better to do but then to irritate me, right? And so it's just patience. But there's never been a child with free access to food who starved to death. Like it won't happen. And I like to remind people of that because it is the biggest fear. And you think, my kid's not getting a well-balanced diet. They're not eating enough. And I'm like, trust me, if you let them do what they need to do, they will be well-balanced. I think we just get so apt, or it's been so ingrained in us that we have to have every meal has to be perfectly balanced. For a child, it's just not the case. Like they may go a week without eating any protein, and then they'll go a month with just full protein, right? So it's kind of like your situation. Like kids are just really in tune to it. And if we let their bodies do what they need to do, it'll all work out in favor of that. But I think it's so fascinating to see adult problems. And I think if you're listening, like think about what food issues do you have and where did it start, and then kind of dealing with that. So like, for instance, my husband was forced to clean his plate. So even though he hated it at the time, what do you think he does now? Like he cleans his plate and he cleans all the kids' plate, right? Like he doesn't let food go to waste. He can't fathom that because that's been ingrained in him. And so there's overeating that's caused by that, right? Like it's okay not to eat everything. Like we have free access to food. You can save it for later or whatever. But that's been so ingrained in him that he can't imagine that. And I think there's a lot of unconscious things that have been started when we were younger that have grown up. I had one of my only consulting clients that I really remember being fascinated with. She hated the dinner table. In fact, she didn't even own one as an adult. And her kids just ate in front of the TV. And I was like, why? And I was like, why don't you just buy one? And she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And I was like, finally, I just kept digging. And it came back like her dinner time was so volatile at her house that it was an awful experience to eat. Like it was just scary and it was overwhelming. And she just hated it. She hated every aspect of what the dinner table meant. And so for her, she's emotionally ate in her closet all of her life, in her bedroom, and so it was kind of like, okay, food isn't the issue. 100%, like maybe not 100% of the time, 90% of the time, food is not the issue in people's health. It's something else, that's something else that's occurred in life. And we have to really start there. And I think so often we want it to be about food and exercise, but if it was, wouldn't we be a world of healthy people. Like if it were that simple, like if it were as simple as calories in equals calories out, we would be healthy individuals because that's so easy and basic, but it's not that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I get really passionate about how we raise healthy eaters. But again, it's really against the grain. And I think that there's a lot of, I have friends who belt their kids to chairs to make them to sit, like they put a belt around their waist and they can't get out of their chair until they finish their food. And to me, it's just, it's not a battle worth fighting.
No. And it's just going to come back and cause more problems than it solves.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things I also have really liked about your podcast is your honesty and you sharing stories about your real life. And you did a great episode back in, I think it was June of last year, talking about how you were taking your business in a different direction. And you talk very candidly about the ups and downs of running a business. And I know there's lots of coaches and practitioners that listen to this show. So is there any advice that you would like to pass on to them or any ideas that you think get glossed over about what it's really like running a business?
Yeah. I mean, I think I started my business and initially I fell into the trap, and I say it's a trap because it's a really slippery slope of believing the perfect systems. And I think that in business, I think life, it just all relates together, right? I think so many people do this in their health too. They believe the traps that there's a perfect way, a perfect weight loss system. Well, in the online world, there's the perfect way to market, and there's the next best way, on your first webinar, make a 6 figures or whatever it is, or your first 5-figure webinar.
Yeah.
And, the more that I did that and the more that I bought into that, I felt like I just lost a piece of me every single time that I did it. And I just lost more joy and I lost more zeal for life. And I really think that I lost the reason and the passion behind why I started. In fact, it got so bad that, my health kind of tanked, which I believe is really just an indicator of how stressed I was because nothing was working, right? None of the perfect systems work. And I was so sick and tired about hearing the next success story. And the next person who jumped on the business train to tell you the exact same thing. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm just not cut out to do this. Like, I'm just not made to do this because nothing is working. And if I was, then it should be working. And so I say I hit rock bottom. I was bad. Like my health was really bad. Emotionally, like I would have said that it was probably the first time that I ever experienced what true depression was. I had no joy, which then made my relationship with my kids suffer. My husband and my relationship definitely tanked, it affected every single area of my life. And so I just kind of was at the end of my rope and I was like, I'm done, I'm done. And, I think, through that, I started talking to, occurrences started happening. I don't believe they're coincidence. And it ended up being that I just couldn't quit, that there was something, there was purpose, there was reason behind what I was doing. And it was in that, it was a year-long transition of me really just learning and growing and allowing myself to be in that pit long enough to experience what I was supposed to grow. And I just realized, I say that they're great worldwide web lies, right? Like it's the lies of the world that tell you can be anything and you can be an overnight success. And maybe you believe that. That's fine. For me, it just wasn't cutting it. And it was killing every single ounce of joy that I had in my life. And what I had to realize was, what am I really passionate about? What are my skills? And what would I do if money weren't an issue? Because I think that for me, I was getting so wrapped up in the money web. And once I stepped outside of that and I just really stepped into there's no perfect system for anyone, just like I believe in health, there's no perfect system, but it really comes down to a uniqueness in who you are. And I think that if we start owning our uniqueness, kind of like what I said about consulting at the time, I would have picked up consulting, even though I knew deep down I wasn't great at it. And then it zapped the joy out of me. It just drained me. And so now just owning what I'm good at and not referring to what I'm not good at, I feel like it's opened the door to me to experience new passion like I've never experienced before, and really just get a grasp of what am I passionate about? What is the need? And how can I actually help people with my gifting in order to help them to live healthier lives? So I feel like it really came down to there's no perfect system, but the system that's created to work within me. Sure, there's principles like health, right? We can build off things, but there is not a perfect system that works for anyone. And I think it really just comes down to owning who you are and working without money as the basis.
Yeah. And
that's a really long-winded answer.
No, it's a really good response, because I mean, I've been doing this. I set up my company in 2009, and it's been a really long road to get to where I am now. And it is really easy in the beginning to fall into the trap of following different online marketers or following people who are like, oh, you just need to do this 5-step formula and you just need to follow this. And then before you know it, it'll be, as you say, like 5-figure webinars or 6-figure months or whatever the thing the person is trying to sell. And like, the people who make that money, and I do believe there are genuinely people who are doing it, and I do believe there are genuinely people who are overnight successes, but they are unicorns. They are not the norm. They are the absolute tiniest percentage of the population, or tiniest percentage of people who are setting up businesses. And for everyone else, it takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work and a lot of struggle. And I don't think that is being talked about. But the more important thing that you said is just finding the thing that you enjoy about it. Like, what is your reason for doing it? Like, yes, you may have to pay the mortgage, or you may have to put food on the table. Like, yes, money is going to be a part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And so finding the thing and the reason for why you want to do it, like enjoying the process as opposed to just hoping for the end goal that you're hoping to get to.
Right. I totally agree. Yeah. I don't feel like money can be the driving force behind owning your own business. Obviously it's important, but to me, it's never worked out in that way. And the more that I just owned who I was and what I was capable of, sharing to help others, that's really when I feel like things change. And having the mindset, I feel like we live in the instant gratification world.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a really big difference between instant gratification and long-term success and like sustainability. And I really had to grasp that. You know, I had to say, I am not going for instant gratification. So why am I living like I am? You know, why am I doing the things that I'm doing for instant gratification? Instead, I just had to transform my mind into, I want to build a sustainable business to help other people. You know, I want something that's going to last and that's going to transform with people, and it's going to transform with needs, because I feel like that's what people need. They don't need another instant gratification system, just like I don't. And so I had to switch my mindset to sustainability. And I feel like that takes out a lot of the ploys out there that are just instant gratification. And I really did. I got a business mentor who wasn't an online marketer, you know, and like that just blew my mind, because that's all I knew. And I'm like, man, there are people who are then doing business consulting before the World Wide Web was around. And man, like we need more of like how people used to build businesses and less about how the World Wide Web can make you famous overnight.
Yeah.
And that really, really transformed it, because I feel like it's how people used to do business. And sometimes I'm like, we need more of that. We need more relatability and just more real and rawness, you know, like in my email series. So I share a lot of my story in I send out a couple of weekly emails a week. And some people are like, oh, it's, you know, you're going to be, what I often hear is you're going to overwhelm people with knowledge. And I say, that's fine. But in it, I feel like I'm relating to people because I'm allowed to be me. So I'm allowed to tell them struggles that I'm going through. I'm allowed to tell them, you know, like a couple months ago, I told them what my blood results showed, you know, like that wasn't what I wanted to see. Like, but I'm also allowed to tell them the good things, you know, things that are going on well. And, I feel like we know as individuals when it's just a marketing scheme. Like we've all been around this World Wide Web long enough to realize, hey, that's just a sales pitch. That's not real information, you know, like, and I feel like we're just also concerned, and I feel like we're always on edge about things that we're learning, right? Like we don't really know what's right and what's wrong. And I feel like we live in a world of confusion because there's so much spammy marketing going on. And so I just decided that I didn't care obviously I need to make money, but that's not my utmost importance, right?
Yeah.
That's not my driving force anymore. My driving force is, hey, I just want to relate to people and I want to help them change. And I want them to show them that I'm a real person too. Like, I'm just trying to figure this out as much as anyone else is. And there's no solid facts when it comes to nutrition. It's a constantly changing and evolving thing. But just trying to create the foundation of what they can rely on. And so once I really stepped into, hey, I'm going to quit the spammy emails, and or what I was trying to create based off of these systems and 5-step formulas, and I'm just going to be me. And I don't care if it's a system or not, and I don't care if it's what everyone tells me I shouldn't be doing. This is what feels right to me. And people respond to it. They respond to the realness because we can all feel it. And when I send back emails, like when people send me emails, I respond to every single email. It might take me a while, but every single email I respond to. And that's important to me because I feel like people don't need another system. They need real people. They need real relationships to back them and to support them and to hold their hand. And that's really my focus. And I know at some point people are going to say, you're crazy for doing it. And I might be crazy for doing it. But right now, this is what I need. And I feel like this is what my what do I want to say? My readers and my following need is they need someone who is going to help them and walk through this with them and support them and be real and honest with them, because there isn't anything perfect in this world. And it's scary and overwhelming no matter where you are in life. And I think we need to get over the instant, perfect, Pinterest-worthy world and just showcase real life. And so, yeah, that has been my passion, and that's transformed everything for me. It's just to step into that realness, because you can only be fake for so long. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, those people that are going to be fake can only last for so long. And I've been ripped off enough times to know, that's not what's going to bring joy to this world. And so, that's not really great advice other than just owning who you are and being unique and just being real with people, being real on social media, or getting off social media if it really impacts you that much. But knowing that we don't need to be perfect, we just need to create progress in life. And that's important to me.
Yeah. No, and I would agree 100% with everything you've said there. So, yeah, great advice. So, before I wrap this up, do you want to tell people where they can find out more information about you? So, like website, social media, that kind of thing. And I'm going to put all the links in the show notes. But, yeah, just please tell the listeners where they can find out more.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. So, you can find more about me at simplerootswellness.com. And my social media handle is on Instagram. It's Alexa Schirm. That's Schirm is SCHIRM, but it'll be in the show notes. Facebook is Simple Roots Wellness, and Twitter is Alexa Schirm as well. So I kind of have it split up there a little bit, but it's Simple Roots Wellness or Alexa Schirm. And I have some freebies over on the blog that you can grab. We also have, when we talk about meal planning and other things, you can find out more about a project that we do to help people meal plan, really just to help people live life more. And it's a daily planner, but it incorporates meal planning and just wellness tips in it. And that's at nourishedplanner.com. And that's like more realistic product, like you could actually get your hands on and incorporate into your daily life kind of thing. So that's nourishedplanner.com. And you can get a free week of that planner that you can print off and try. And if you're new to meal planning, I always tell people to try that out. Really, it's just not a sales scheme. It's really just to help you get into the groove of meal planning. So I'd encourage you to go there and print that off as well. But yeah, simplerootswellness.com. I have a podcast too. I'm not weekly, every other week right now. Just getting into real life, talking about real life issues and just health things in general.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you so much, Lex, for coming on the show. I really enjoyed what you had to say. I love our conversation about kids and eating, and it really brought up a lot of memories for me as well. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.